The Secret Lives of Prison Inmates, True Stories from Behind Bars. The cell that doesn't change. In many prison systems around the world, there are cells designed not for punishment in the traditional sense, but for separation. They are called segregation units. Isolation units. In some facilities they are known simply as the box. The dimensions are consistent. A few steps from wall to wall. A bed that cannot be moved. A door that does not open unless someone else decides it should. In the United States, extended solitary confinement has been documented in federal and state prisons for decades. According to reports from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, tens of thousands of inmates have spent time in restrictive housing, often for 22 to 24 hours a day. Other countries use similar systems, though under different names and regulations. The conditions are controlled, measured, and recorded. Time inside these cells is not experienced the same way. There are no moving parts. No variation in environment. No meaningful change between morning and night. A correctional officer may pass by at scheduled intervals. Meals are delivered through a slot in the door. Communication is limited, often restricted to brief, functional exchanges. The architecture itself enforces distance. Solid doors reduce sound. Windows, if present, are often narrow and positioned too high to see anything beyond the sky. Artificial lighting may remain on continuously or follow a strict schedule that the inmate does not control. In documented accounts collected by organizations such as Amnesty International and the American Civil Liberties Union, individuals held in prolonged isolation have described the environment as unchanging to the point of disorientation. Not because of overt physical harm, but because of the absence of variation. In 2015, the United Nations revised its standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners, now known as the Nelson Mandela Rules. These guidelines define prolonged solitary confinement as any period exceeding 15 consecutive days. Beyond that threshold, the risk of psychological harm increases significantly. This is not speculation. Clinical studies, including research published in academic journals on correctional health, have documented measurable effects. Difficulty concentrating. Heightened anxiety. Disturbances in sleep patterns. In some cases, hallucinations. These outcomes are not uniform and they do not occur in every individual. But they are consistent enough to be recorded across multiple prison systems. Inside the cell there is little to anchor perception. No external reference points. No movement beyond the limited space. The body adapts to confinement. Steps become shorter. Movements become slower. Routines develop, not out of preference but necessity. An inmate may pace the length of the cell repeatedly. From door to wall. From wall to door. The distance does not change. Some correctional departments document these behaviors as part of routine observation logs. They are not considered unusual. They are expected. The purpose of isolation varies. In some cases, it is used for disciplinary reasons. In others, for administrative separation. There are also instances where inmates request protective custody, placing themselves in similar conditions for safety from other prisoners. Regardless of the reason, the physical environment remains the same. Concrete, steel, limited light, limited sound, limited interaction. The absence of human contact is a defining feature. In general population units, inmates are exposed to constant noise, voices, movement, televisions, doors opening and closing. In isolation, that background disappears. What remains is controlled silence. Not complete silence, but a reduced version of it. Footsteps in the corridor. The distant echo of metal doors. Occasional instructions from staff. Everything else is contained. Over time, the lack of variation can affect perception. This has been documented in correctional mental health evaluations and legal cases challenging long-term segregation practices. Courts in several jurisdictions have reviewed these conditions, particularly when isolation extends for months or years. In some rulings, judges have acknowledged the psychological impact without necessarily eliminating the practice entirely. As a result, policies have evolved in certain regions. Some systems have introduced time limits. Others have increased access to mental health services. But the core structure of the cell remains largely unchanged. It is designed for control. Every element serves a function. The bed is fixed. The sink is integrated. The door is solid. There is nothing inside that can be altered by the person occupying it. This is not incidental. It is intentional. Control in this environment is not enforced through constant action. It is embedded in the design. The inmate does not choose when the lights turn on, or when the door opens, or when interaction occurs. Those decisions are made externally, according to institutional schedules and procedures. In official correctional manuals, these systems are described in neutral terms: operational, structured, necessary for safety and order. The language does not describe experience. It describes function. But inside the cell, experience is shaped by repetition. Day after day. The same walls. The same dimensions. The same limited view. There are no visible markers of time passing, beyond the routines imposed from outside. For some inmates, this environment lasts days. For others, weeks. In documented cases, it has extended to years. Each system records these durations differently. Each justifies them within its own legal and administrative framework. But the physical reality does not vary. The cell does not change. And for the person inside it, neither does the space they must navigate, measure, and endure. The design remains constant. The silence remains controlled. And the distance between the walls stays exactly the same. A system of time and movement. In prison, time is not measured by personal choice. It is structured, divided, and enforced. Each day follows a schedule that is set by the institution, not the individual. Wake-up times are fixed. Meals are delivered at specific hours. Movement, when permitted, happens within narrow windows. This structure is not unique to one country or system. It is a consistent feature across correctional institutions globally. In facilities operated under the authority of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, daily routines are documented in operational manuals that outline when inmates wake, eat, move, and return to their cells. Similar frameworks exist in Europe, Africa, and Asia, adapted to local laws and resources. The purpose is uniformity, predictability, control. Inside high-security units, movement is limited and closely monitored. Inmates do not move freely between spaces. Every transition, from cell to shower, from cell to recreation area, is authorized and supervised. Doors do not open automatically. They are controlled remotely or manually by staff. In many facilities, only one door opens at a time within a secure section. This prevents unsupervised contact. It also slows movement. A single trip outside the cell may involve multiple pauses. Waiting for clearance. Waiting for the next door. Waiting for instruction. This process is documented in institutional procedures as controlled movement. It is designed to reduce risk. But it also defines the pace of daily life. Time in this environment becomes segmented. Not by hours chosen freely but by intervals assigned. 15 minutes for a shower. 1 hour for recreation if permitted. Several minutes for meal distribution. The rest is spent inside the cell. In some high-security settings, inmates are escorted in restraints when leaving their cells. Hands secured. Sometimes feet as well. The exact protocol depends on the classification level of the inmate and the policies of the institution. These measures are recorded in security guidelines and incident prevention strategies. They are not applied arbitrarily. They follow established criteria. But for the individual, the experience is consistent. Movement is conditional, temporary, closely observed. Even routine actions require approval. A request to leave the cell. A request for medical attention. A request for access to legal materials. Each is processed through formal channels. Forms. Logs. Clearance procedures. The system is built on documentation. Every action, every movement, every interaction is recorded. Correctional officers maintain logs of inmate activity throughout their shifts. These records are used for accountability, review, and, when necessary, investigation. They form part of the official history of each inmate's time in custody. In reports published by organizations such as Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, routine and structure are described as essential components of institutional stability. Without them, the system becomes unpredictable. With them, behavior can be monitored and managed. But the structure does more than regulate behavior. It defines experience. The repetition of daily routines creates a pattern that rarely changes. Morning follows night, but not in a way that feels distinct. Meals arrive, but not as events, more as markers. Movement occurs, but only within boundaries. Over time, individuals adapt to this pattern. They learn the timing. They anticipate the sequence. They adjust their actions to fit within the system's framework. This adaptation is documented in studies on prison behavior and institutionalization. Inmates develop routines that align with the environment. Some exercise within the limited space of their cells. Others read, write, or engage in permitted activities during designated hours. These behaviors are not formally required. but they emerge as responses to a structured environment. In maximum security settings, even recreation is controlled. Outdoor areas, when available, are often enclosed. Concrete yards, high walls, limited visibility beyond the perimeter. In some facilities, recreation takes place in individual enclosures. Separate spaces designed to prevent contact between inmates. The duration is fixed. The space is defined. The interaction is minimal. This is not incidental. It reflects the same principles applied throughout the institution. Control, separation, observation. Inside the corridor, the environment reinforces these principles. The design is repetitive. Doors spaced evenly. Lighting consistent. No variation in layout. This uniformity is intentional. It allows staff to monitor multiple cells efficiently. It reduces blind spots. It standardizes operations. For inmates, it creates a sense of sameness. One door is indistinguishable from the next. One section mirrors another. There are no personal identifiers visible from the outside. No indication of who occupies each space. Identity, in this context, is recorded in files, not expressed in the environment. Communication within this system is limited. In some units, inmates may speak briefly through doors or during controlled movement. In others, communication is restricted entirely. Policies vary by institution and classification level. But the underlying structure remains consistent. Interaction is regulated. Spontaneity is minimized. The result is an environment where time passes according to institutional design. Not personal rhythm. Not external cues. But schedules, procedures, and controlled intervals. For staff, this structure provides order. For inmates, it defines existence. Every day begins the same way. Every movement follows protocol. Every action is part of a system that does not adjust to the individual. The system remains fixed. The schedule repeats. And within that repetition, time continues to move, measured not by freedom but by control. Contact, distance, and the human voice. In prison, communication does not stop. But it changes. It becomes structured, monitored, and, in many cases, reduced. Contact with the outside world is regulated through systems designed to balance access with control. These systems vary across institutions, but they follow similar principles. In-person visits, when permitted, are often conducted under strict supervision. In higher security settings, physical contact may be restricted entirely. Barriers are introduced. Glass partitions. Separate seating. Fixed positions. Communication takes place through telephones or intercom systems. The design ensures visibility at all times. Nothing is left unobserved. In facilities governed by policies from agencies such as the Federal Bureau of Prisons, visitation procedures are outlined in detail. Who can visit? When visits can occur? How long they last? What can be brought in? What must remain outside? These rules are applied consistently with limited exceptions. The environment is controlled. The interaction is time-bound. A visit may last an hour, sometimes less. At the end, the separation remains. The inmate returns to the unit. The visitor exits the facility. The distance is restored. For many inmates, phone communication becomes the primary link to the outside. Access to telephones is scheduled and often limited. Calls are monitored and, in many systems, recorded. This is standard practice, documented in correctional policies worldwide. The purpose is security. To prevent coordination of illegal activity. To maintain oversight. But the effect is also personal. Conversations are shaped by awareness. Words are chosen carefully. Pauses are measured. There is no assumption of privacy. In reports published by the Prison Policy Initiative, access to communication has been identified as a key factor in maintaining social ties during incarceration. Family contact, legal communication, personal relationships, all depend on systems that are, by design, limited. The cost of phone calls in some jurisdictions has also been documented as a barrier. Not universally, but in specific systems where services are contracted through private providers. These details are recorded in regulatory filings and public reports. They are part of the structure. Written communication remains another channel. Letters. In many institutions, incoming and outgoing mail is inspected. But reviewed. This process is not hidden. It is stated clearly in institutional guidelines. The goal is to prevent the transfer of contraband or unauthorized information. But it also means that communication is filtered, delayed, sometimes restricted. Despite this, written correspondence continues. It provides a form of connection that is not dependent on schedules or immediate access. A letter can be read more than once. It can be kept, stored, returned to. In documented accounts from inmates across different systems, letters are often described as one of the few personal items that carry continuity, something that remains constant in an environment where most elements do not. Inside the facility, communication between inmates is also regulated. In general population units, interaction may occur more freely, within limits. Shared spaces, work assignments, recreation periods. But even in these settings, movement and contact are monitored. In higher security or segregated units, interaction is significantly reduced. Communication may occur through doors, short exchanges during movement, or not at all depending on policy. The level of restriction is determined by classification systems. These systems assess risk based on multiple factors: behavior, sentence length, institutional history. Each classification level corresponds to a different degree of access and restriction. This structure is documented in correctional frameworks across countries, including those outlined by the Nigerian Correctional Service. The principles remain consistent. Higher risk classifications result in tighter controls. Lower classifications allow for more interaction. But even at the least restrictive levels, communication is not unregulated. It exists within boundaries, defined, enforced, observed. The presence of staff is constant, not always direct, but always implied. Cameras monitor common areas. Officers conduct rounds. Logs are maintained. Every interaction occurs within a system that records and oversees it. This is not incidental. It is part of institutional design. For inmates, the effect is cumulative. Conversations are limited in time, limited in privacy, limited in frequency. Relationships continue but under constraint. The rhythm of communication shifts. It becomes scheduled, anticipated, sometimes interrupted. There are documented cases where access to communication has been expanded. Pilot programs, policy reforms, increased visitation opportunities, reduced call costs. These changes are recorded in official reports and policy updates. But they are not uniform across all systems. They vary by jurisdiction, by facility, by available resources. What remains consistent is the presence of structure. Communication is allowed, but it is managed. Distance is reduced, but not removed. The barrier, physical or procedural, remains in place. A glass partition, a monitored phone line, an open letter. Each represents a controlled connection, a way to maintain contact without relinquishing oversight. Inside the visitation room, the environment reflects this balance. Two people sit facing each other, separated by a surface that cannot be crossed. Voices travel through devices, not through open space. Time is measured. When it ends, the connection is paused again. Until the next scheduled moment. Until the next approved call. Until the next letter arrives. The system does not prevent communication, but it defines it, shapes it, limits it. And within those limits, relationships persist, adjusted to fit the boundaries that surround them. After the door opens, release from prison is a defined process. It is documented, scheduled, recorded in administrative systems that track entry and exit with precision. The moment itself is not spontaneous. It follows procedure. Identification is verified. Paperwork is completed. Property, if retained by the institution, is returned. Clothing is exchanged. In many systems, the process takes place in a designated area near the facility's perimeter, separate from the housing units, separate from the routines that define daily life inside. The transition is physical, but it is also structured. In reports from correctional authorities, including the Nigerian Correctional Service and similar agencies globally, release procedures are described in operational terms. Clear steps, defined responsibilities, no ambiguity. The system that controlled entry now manages exit. But release does not immediately remove the effects of confinement. This has been documented in multiple studies on incarceration and reentry. The adjustment to environments outside prison can be gradual, not because the outside is unfamiliar, but because the conditions inside were consistent, structured, repetitive. Inside, time was scheduled, movement was controlled, interaction was regulated. Outside, those structures are no longer imposed in the same way. Decisions return, choice returns, but not always immediately in practice. In research published by institutions such as the Prison Reform Trust, individuals leaving custody have described the early stages of release as a period of adaptation. Daily routines must be rebuilt independently. Simple actions, when to eat, where to go, how to organize time, are no longer assigned. They must be decided. This shift is not theoretical. It is documented across correctional systems and reentry programs. The duration of incarceration can influence this process. Short-term detention presents one set of adjustments. Long-term incarceration presents another. In cases where individuals have spent extended periods in controlled environments, the transition may involve structured support. Some systems provide this through reentry programs, housing assistance, employment services, counseling. These programs are recorded in policy documents and government reports. Their availability varies by country, by region, by funding. But the need for transition is consistently recognized. Inside prison, identity is often tied to classification, inmate number, housing unit, security level. These identifiers are functional. They are used for management, tracking, documentation. Outside, those identifiers are no longer active, but their effects may remain in records. Background checks, legal documentation, employment screenings. These are part of the broader system that extends beyond the prison itself. They are not administered by the prison alone, but they are connected to it. The physical act of leaving is direct. A door opens, a boundary is crossed, but the institutional experience does not end at that point. It shifts. In documented interviews and reentry studies, individuals have described the awareness of space differently after release. Open environments, unrestricted movement, the absence of constant monitoring. These conditions are typical outside prison, but they contrast with the controlled environment inside. This contrast is not interpreted the same way by everyone. Experiences vary, but the difference is consistent. Inside, space was limited. Outside, it is not. Inside, time was assigned. Outside, it is self-directed. Inside, communication was monitored. Outside, it is not subject to the same level of control. These differences are not presented as conclusions. They are observations recorded in studies, reports, and first-hand accounts. The system defines one environment. The absence of that system defines another. For those who remain inside, the structure continues unchanged. Schedules repeat. Doors open and close according to protocol. Communication follows established rules. The environment remains consistent. For those who leave, the structure is no longer externally enforced, but its influence may persist. This is not a single moment. It is a process, documented, observed, studied across multiple correctional systems. The prison does not follow the individual beyond its walls, but its structure, its routines, and its constraints can shape what comes next. The door closes again. For someone else. Inside, the system continues. Outside, life resumes, without the schedule, without the restrictions, without the controlled space. But not without the memory of it. If you found this documentary valuable, you can share your thoughts, perspectives, or experiences in the comments. Engagement helps bring attention to documented realities that are often unseen.